Let's get brutally honest for a moment.
Intimacy is never just physical. It's psychological warfare, a test of boundaries, control, emotion, vulnerability, and perception. And for those who truly observe, not just participate, what happens after speaks volumes louder than anything that happened before. Because after the last breath is caught, after the sheets settle and the room quiets, that's when everything unsaid begins to scream. What goes through the mind at that precise moment reveals everything. You can't fake clarity when silence wraps the room. Post-intimacy thoughts are raw, stripped of performance. There's no more pretending, no more roles, just truth. And the truth isn't always romantic. After the physical act, there's an internal audit that happens, a silent assessment. Not of the experience, but of the connection. It's where the mind subconsciously asks, was I truly present, or was I just passing time? Do I feel closer or more alone than ever? Did I just give a part of myself, or did I take something I wasn't ready for? It's in these moments where the distinction between lust and emotional intimacy becomes violently clear. Because when connection is genuine, post-intimacy brings peace, a sense of grounding, a quiet knowing. But when it's superficial, when it's a transaction rather than a bond, what follows is distance, withdrawal, sometimes even regret, not because of the act itself, but because of the emotional emptiness that shadows it. You see, intimacy is a spotlight. It exposes what words cannot. It uncovers the truth. People hide behind smiles, confidence, and even seduction. If there is anxiety, detachment, discomfort, it becomes. And it's during that afterglow that every facade begins to crack. Energy doesn't lie. The most dangerous illusion is believing that physical closeness always equals emotional depth. That's the trap, the lie that leads to the cycle of confusion, heartbreak, and misaligned expectations. People think the test is during the act. It's not. The test is after. How present are they? Are they emotionally grounded? Or already gone, eyes glazed, body still there but spirit elsewhere? The truth is, most people aren't afraid of sex. They're afraid of what it exposes. Intimacy, in its truest form, is vulnerability, naked in more ways than one. And if that scares someone, their exit strategy begins the moment it's over. No words are needed. Distance will speak, distraction will scream, and silence, real silence, the kind you feel in your chest, will be deafening. Now here's the kicker. Too many ignore what happens after. They overanalyze the before and the during, obsessing over attraction, performance, chemistry, but completely overlook the moment that tells all. So here's the truth that cuts through the noise. Pay attention to the quiet moments. That's where the answers are. When there's no more show to perform, what remains? Stillness or chaos, tension or confusion. That's what reveals the real dynamic. Not the touch, not the words, not even the eye contact during, but the energy that lingers when it's over. So don't ask questions you're not ready to hear the answers to. But when you do want clarity, real gut-punching, eyes wide open clarity, observe the aftermath. That's the confession. That's the real story. Now ask yourself, what do you feel in those moments? What energy are you allowing into your life, into your body, into your mind, into your emotional world? Stop giving your power away to temporary connections. Start demanding truth, not through words, but through action, consistency, presence. And if you want more than just intimacy, if you want depth, safety, respect, then make it a standard, not a request. Watch how different the room feels after. That's where your power begins. Don't settle for noise. Listen to the silence. Now move different. Have you ever noticed how the real truth of a connection doesn't surface during the heat of the moment, but only once the silence returns? When the adrenaline settles, the touch fades, and the breathing slows, that's when clarity rises like smoke from a fire. It's not about the words said before or the movements shared during. The most telling part of intimacy is what happens after. That's the space where everything hidden reveals itself, without needing permission. People often mistake the act of sex for connection, but real connection doesn't scream. It whispers in the quiet. You can learn more from the energy in the room after than from any passionate moment before. When it's real, that stillness feels safe, grounding, electric in its own way. But when it's not, when it's hollow, misaligned, or emotionally vacant, that silence becomes loud, even suffocating. You can feel the disconnection immediately, and no amount of physical closeness can mask the emotional distance that creeps in once the performance ends. There's a reason people feel confusion after intimacy. It's not because of the act, it's because of what they ignored going into it. When someone isn't truly present with you, when their body is EGENs, but their mind and heart are detached, it creates a fracture in the emotional atmosphere. And after the final moment, when there are no more movements to distract or stimulate, that fracture becomes glaring. It exposes what was missing all along. Some say the truth comes out in the morning, but really the truth comes out minutes after. It's in the shift in tone, the glance that lingers too long or doesn't add up. It's in whether there's tenderness or withdrawal, presence or pretense. The human psyche is sharp in those quiet spaces. Even if someone doesn't speak, their energy speaks volumes. And that energy always tells the truth. You can't hide what you feel once the noise is gone, once the lights are low and the closeness fades. Who you are in that moment is who you really are, with that person. This is why so many feel emotionally bruised after what seemed like a good time. They weren't connecting, they were coping, they weren't bonding, they were escaping. And intimacy is a terrible terror to escape in. It demands truth, not just physical honesty, but emotional integrity. The body will go through the motions, but the soul, it never pretends. If it doesn't feel safe, if it doesn't feel seen, it retreats. And when one retreats, the other feels abandoned, even if they don't understand why.
That's where the emotional confusion begins.
When the outside says connection, but the inside screams, I'm not here, that internal contradiction becomes impossible to ignore once the intimacy ends. It's why some people leave feeling high while others leave feeling hollow. The high comes from truth, the hollow comes from disconnect, and your body will always tell you which one it was. You'll feel it in your chest, in your gut, in how you sleep afterward, or how restless you suddenly become. After intimacy, if you find yourself overthinking, feeling used, questioning your worth, pause. Those feelings aren't irrational. They're your intuition trying to protect you. That's the aftermath doing its job, breaking reality, not the fantasy, not the wishful thinking, but the truth of what this connection really is and what it never was. See, during the act, hormones take over, dopamine, oxytocin. The body is a cocktail of sensation and illusion. But after, when the chemistry fades and the body returns to baseline, that's when clarity hits. It doesn't lie, it doesn't sugarcoat, it just reveals. And for those brave enough to feel it, to truly sit in the aftermath, that moment can be the most powerful teacher of all. What do they do when the high is over? Do they lean in or pull away? Do they stay present or emotionally disappear? That response is not just a habit, it's a reflection of their relative style, their emotional maturity, their intention. People who value connection show up after. They're still there in the silence. They don't rush it, they don't avoid it, because they understand the intimacy isn't over. Once the act ends, it's only just beginning. It's in that after space where emotional safety is either confirmed or denied. The warmth, the stillness, the care, or the absence of it tells you everything. And it tells you in a language older than words, a language of presence, of still energy, of subconscious reaction. That's why the aftermath matters, because it tells you what the act could never fully show. It's the unfiltered emotional audit, and most people ignore it. They chase the spark, the thrill, the performance, but overlook the single most revealing part of intimacy, how someone makes you feel after. That's when the mask slips. That's when the energy tells the truth. And that's when your body, your intuition, your emotional self all begin to process what really happened. Some call it post-nut clarity, others laugh about it, dismiss it, joke it off. But what they're really referencing is that flood of truth that rushes in once the stimulation is gone. And that truth isn't just about what was done, it's about who they are and how deeply you are or aren't seen. So if you want to know the truth of a connection, don't overanalyze the conversation. Don't decode every look during, just sit in the silence after. Watch what energy walks into the room when everything Evans walks out. Listen with your body, feel with your intuition, trust what lingers when all else fades. Because that's not just a moment. It's a message. Have you ever been touched but still felt alone? Been held but not truly seen? That's the power of presence, or the haunting ache of its absence. In a world that glorifies the physical act of intimacy, presence has become the most underrated form of connection. It's not about where the hands go or how perfectly the scene plays out. It's about who's really there with you in that moment. And when presence is missing, no amount of physical closeness can make up for the emotional distance. There's something unmistakably powerful about someone who is fully present with you. They aren't distracted, they aren't rushing, they aren't waiting for the act to be over. They're with you fully, deeply, and without pretense. Their touch is intentional, their eyes don't wander, their energy wraps around you like a cocoon, saying without words, I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere. That kind of presence creates safety. It allows for emotional surrender. It invites truth. Now flip that. Think of the time someone's body was close, but their energy was miles away. You could feel them holding back, not just physically, but emotionally. Maybe they were thinking of someone else. Maybe they were replaying an argument in their head. Maybe they were just trying to get through the moment without ever letting their guard down. Whatever the reason, their absence was deafening, and your body knew it. It always knows. Presence is not about proximity, it's about emotional availability. It's the difference between being touched and being held. It's the difference between being seen as a person versus being used as a distraction, a release, or a routine. When someone is present, you feel it in the smallest details, in the way they pause, in the way they breathe with you, in the way their energy matches yours, instead of overpowering or escaping it. So much of modern intimacy is performative, fast, goal-oriented, disconnected. People rush through connection like it's a checklist. But real intimacy doesn't work on a schedule. It unfolds slowly. It demands presence. It demands a willingness to experience, not just consume. And when someone is only halfway in, even the most passionate encounter can leave you feeling unseen, untouched, and unimportant. The most dangerous kind of partner is not the one who lacks skill, but the one who lacks presence. Because you can teach someone how to move, how to touch, how to please, but you cannot teach person how to care. You cannot force presence. It is either chosen or denied. And when it's denied, you feel it like a cold draft in a warm room, subtle, but impossible to ignore. Presence and intimacy is a kind of emotional leadership. It means setting the tone of care, trust, and grounding. It's not about dominance or control. It's about showing up with full awareness. And that awareness makes the difference between intimacy that heals and intimacy that wounds. Because when someone is present, they're not just interacting with your body, they're engaging your mind, your emotions, your energy. That's what transforms a physical act into a spiritual experience. Have you ever closed your eyes during intimacy, not because you were overwhelmed with pleasure, but because you were trying to escape the feeling of being alone with someone else in the room? That's what a lack of presence does. It forces you to disconnect, to protect yourself. You can't trust what's happening because their energy keeps slipping away. Their eyes glance at the clock, their touch feels rehearsed, their breathing doesn't sync with yours, and suddenly you're left wondering if you even matter in that moment. That's not intimacy, that's emotional neglect, wrapped in physical proximity. On the other hand, when someone is truly present, you feel like the only person in the world. There's a softness, a slowness, a kind of reverence in the way they approach you. They're not there to conquer or escape. They're there to connect. Their focus isn't on performance, it's on experience. They listen with their body, they respond with their energy, and that presence makes you feel not just desirable, but valued. So much healing happens when someone finally sees you fully, not just naked in body, but bare in emotion. When they hold space for your insecurities, your hesitations, your needs. When they don't rush your rhythm, but match it. That kind of presence dissolves shame. It melts walls. It allows pleasure to be something more than just physical. It becomes affirming, empowering, safe. The reason so many feel unsatisfied after intimacy isn't because of the act, it's because presence was never truly there. The body might have been touched, but the heart remained untouched. And that leaves a hunger that no physical satisfaction can fill. Because humans don't just crave sex, they crave recognition. They crave attention, not just to the surface, but to the soul underneath. Being fully present with someone during intimacy is one of the rarest gifts you can give. It says, I choose to witness you, not just take from you, not just distract myself with you, but fully be with you. And when that kind of presence is mutual, intimacy becomes something entirely different. It's no longer an act, it's an exchange, a dance of energies, a shared stillness that doesn't need to be explained to be understood. When someone is truly present with you, you don't need to ask if they care. You feel it. You feel it in the way they linger in silence, in the way they breathe in your pauses, in the way they stay, even after the peak has passed. That kind of presence doesn't chase a goal, it cherishes the moment, and in that moment, everything that matters becomes obvious. Have you ever laid beside someone tangled in sheets, your body still warm from closeness, but your heart strangely distant? That feeling, the ache behind the quiet, isn't about the act itself, it's about safety. Not physical, but emotional. Because true intimacy doesn't begin in the bedroom, it begins in trust, and trust is built, not assumed. Emotional safety is what allows someone to relax into vulnerability, to show up fully, to open themselves, not just their body, but their fears, their wants, their insecurities. Without that safety, intimacy becomes performance, a mask, a transaction rather than a transformation. Most people never even realize how emotionally unsafe they feel until after it's over. They sense the tension in their chest, the overthinking, the way they shrink or scan or self-protect. The body may pay, but the soul folds up and hides. And that hidden self, the one who fears rejection, the one who wants to be seen without judgment, stays buried because it never felt like the moment could hold it. When intimacy happens without emotional safety, it's like stepping into deep water without knowing how to swim. You float, you flail, you perform, but you never relax, you never let go. And that's where the disconnect begins. Because when someone doesn't feel emotionally safe, they start calculating, they don't say what they want, they say what they think will be accepted. They don't express how they feel. They say what sounds right. They don't move with their natural rhythm. They conform to what they assume will please. That entire interaction becomes one long, silent compromise. And the tragedy is, neither person may even realize it. Imagine sharing yourself skin to skin, but holding your breath emotionally the entire time. Imagine nodding when you want to say no, smiling when something hurts, staying still when everything inside you wants to pull away or speak up. That's what happens when emotional safety isn't there. The body complies, but the soul disappears. And when it's over, what lingers isn't connection. It's confusion, discomfort, sometimes even shame, not because of what was done, but because of what couldn't be expressed. The truth is, emotional safety changes everything. It doesn't just invite honesty, it demands it. It says you don't have to perform here. It creates a space where the nervous system can finally exhale, where the heart doesn't have to brace for judgment, where the mind can stop anticipating rejection. And in that space, real intimacy that nourishes, affirms, heals, can finally unfold. People think chemistry is the fire, the spark, the heat. But what makes that fire sustainable is emotional safety. Because without it, even the strongest chemistry burns out. The moment there's discomfort, misunderstanding, fear of judgment, or emotional neglect, the body begins to armor itself. That armor can look like silence, withdrawal, hyperperformance, or shutting down altogether. The mind goes into protection mode, and intimacy becomes an arena instead of a sanctuary. Have you ever caught yourself asking, why do I feel so disconnected after something that was supposed to bring me closer? That's your body telling you there was no emotional foundation. You stepped into vulnerability, but the ground wasn't there to catch you. That fall is subtle, but deeply felt. It doesn't scream. It whispers in the way you avoid eye contact after, in the sudden urge to leave, in the feeling of wanting to rewind time and do it differently, or not at all. On the other hand, when emotional safety is present, everything changes. You speak more freely. You ask for what you want without fearing the answer. You allow your imperfections to be seen because you know they won't be weaponized. You stay present, not because you're trying to prove something, but because you feel safe enough to be yourself. That kind of space creates depth, a depth that can't be faked or forced. In real intimacy, emotional safety allows for slowness, for awkwardness, for laughter that breaks the tension, for tears that aren't hidden, for silence that doesn't need to be filled. When you don't fear being judged, everything becomes more human, more honest, more intimate. That safety allows you to drop the script, drop the ego, drop the defenses, and what's left is presence, not performance, not perfection, just truth. The reason many never experience this level of intimacy is because they're so used to surviving. They've learned to keep one foot out the door, to protect their heart, even as they give their body. But that kind of disconnection catches up. It leaves an emotional residue. It manifests as dissatisfaction, resentment, or a gnawing sense of something's missing. That something isn't more passion or more excitement. It's more security. When you feel emotionally safe with someone, your nervous system knows. It slows down. It softens. You don't need to hide or guess. You don't need to shrink or explain yourself into exhaustion. That space holds you. It hears you, even when you're silent. And because you feel safe, your vulnerability becomes power, not a weakness. Your desires become conversation, not shame. Your fears become shared, not buried. So much of the disconnection in modern relationships comes from people not knowing what emotional safety actually feels like. They think they're being difficult, needy, too sensitive. But what they're actually craving is that deep, unshakable knowing that they're not just being used, but being chosen. Not just touched, but treasured. Not just tolerated, but truly understood. When someone gives you that space where your body, mind, and heart all feel welcome, you remember what real intimacy is supposed to be. Not a test, not a game, not a transaction, but a refuge, a mirror, a soft place to land in a world that rarely offers one. Have you ever walked away from someone's touch and felt a weight instead of warmth, an energy that lingered, not because it healed you, but because it drained you? That's the thing about intimacy. It's never just physical, it's energetic, and energy doesn't lie. No matter how good the words sound, no matter how rehearsed the gestures feel, the body knows what the soul refuses to admit. After the pleasure fades, the energy left behind becomes the loudest truth in the room. When someone touches you without being fully present, without care, without genuine intention, it leaves a mark, maybe not one you can see, but one you can feel. The absence of respect, of real connection, of integrity, it echoes. And sometimes what echoes doesn't hurt because of what was done, but because of what was missing. Energy isn't about sparks or chemistry. It's about alignment. It's about what stays with you after, what moves inside of you when they're gone. We've been conditioned to chase the high, the rush, the butterflies, but what no one tells you is that real intimacy isn't found in the thrill. It's found in the aftermath, and that aftermath is made of energy, the kind of energy that either calms your nervous system or sets it on fire, that makes you feel centered or shattered. This is why some people leave you feeling seen, while others leave you feeling used. It's not always about what they did, it's about what their presence or their absence left behind. Too often, intimacy is reduced to performance. Actions become checklists, touch becomes technique, but presence, intention, integrity, those are harder to fake, because even if the act looks perfect, if the nary behind it is off, the body will recoil, maybe not in the moment, but soon after. You'll feel restless, uneasy, emotionally scrambled. And when you try to explain it, it won't be easy to put into words. Because what you're feeling isn't confusion, it's misaligned energy trying to warn you. This is the truth most people avoid. Energy reveals character. It tells you what someone's words won't. If their touch drains you, if their silence makes you question your worth, if their closeness leaves you feeling hollow, that's not your insecurity, it's your intuition. The body is a sensitive instrument. It knows when it's being cherished and when it's being used. It knows when it's being held with care and when it's just a placeholder for someone else's agenda. That knowing doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers, but if you listen, it tells you everything. Have you ever noticed how some people leave a residue on your skin even when they're no longer around? That residue is energy, and it's not just about physical touch. It's about what they brought into the room with them. Anger they didn't speak of, shame they projected onto you, insecurity they masked with overconfidence. Intimacy doesn't cleanse those things. It amplifies them. Whatever is present in the room, emotionally and energetically, becomes part of the exchange. And if someone's energy is chaotic, unresolved, or manipulative, it doesn't matter how gentle they seem, they'll leave you feeling contaminated. True intimacy is clean energy, safe energy, grounded energy. It's not loud, but it's unmistakable. It doesn't leave you second-guessing your value. It doesn't make you feel feeler. It doesn't force you to become someone else in order to be accepted. When the energy is right, intimacy becomes a sanctuary, not a battlefield, a place of restoration, not depletion, a moment of clarity, not confusion. There's a reason people feel emotionally disoriented after being with someone who lacked integrity. It's because their body was opened, but not honored. Their space was entered, but not respected. Their vulnerability was touched, but not held. And that wound doesn't come from physicality. It comes from energetic violation, from someone entering with selfishness instead of sincerity, from someone taking instead of offering, from someone being emotionally absent while physically close. Energy is the unspoken language of intimacy. It communicates what mouths can't. It tells you if someone is sincere, if someone is safe, if someone truly sees you, or is just passing time. You don't need to overanalyze their words. If you tune into their energy, watch how your body reacts when they walk in. Do you tense? Do you soften? Do you feel like hiding parts of yourself? Or do you feel expansive, calm, grounded? That reaction is the real truth, not the compliments, not the scripted charm, not the performance. Some people leave you feeling nourished, as if something inside you was acknowledged, held, even healed. Others leave you with an emptiness you can't explain, a fog, a fatigue, a disconnection. That difference has nothing to do with how attractive they were or how well they performed. It's about what they carried into the space. It's about whether they brought peace or projected pain. We often ignore this because we want to believe that intimacy means connection. But connection without aligned energy is an illusion. It's surface level. It mimics closeness, but it doesn't create it. Because true closeness requires more than bodies. It requires congruence, a match between intention, presence, and emotional truth. And when those things are out of sync, the result is always imbalance. Intimacy should never leave you feeling less than. It should never leave you questioning your worth, your instincts, or your wholeness. If it does, it's not your fault. It's your body responding to energy that was never meant to stay. It's your nervous system saying, this wasn't safe, this wasn't clean, this wasn't real. And the more you learn to listen to that, the more you protect yourself from the kind of intimacy that steals instead of strengthens. Have you ever felt like you were in a scene, not a moment, like the intimacy unfolding wasn't happening with you, but was being performed at you? That eerie sensation of being a spectator in your own vulnerability is what happens when performance replaces connection. In a world obsessed with appearances, with being good enough, desirable enough, skilled enough, people are performing in bed the same way they perform on stage, hoping applause will feel like love. But no amount of technical perfection can substitute for emotional truth, and when intimacy becomes a show, everyone loses. Performance might impress the body, but only presence touches the soul. And too often, people are focused on the right moves, the right sounds, the right expressions, but they're not actually there. Their mind is on validation, their heart is guarded, their actions are driven by ego, not empathy. And the result? A polished moment that feels entirely empty. It looks like connection, it sounds like desire, but it feels like distance, because it is. When someone performs during intimacy, they're not trying to connect, they're trying to control the outcome, control how they're perceived, control whether they're desired again, control the narrative. But connection doesn't grow in control. It grows in surrender, in vulnerability, in the unfiltered, unpolished rhythm of two people being real with each other. And that kind of rawness can't be faked. It can't be choreographed. It has to be felt. Many people think performing in intimacy makes them better lovers. They think delivering a fantasy is the key to satisfaction. But the truth is, the greatest pleasure doesn't come from performance. It comes from presence, from fluency, from the safety of being yourself and being accepted in that truth. When someone is truly present with you, not trying to be impressive, but simply trying to be real, everything slows down, breathing sinks, eyes soften. The moment becomes sacred, not staged. That kind of intimacy doesn't need a script. It doesn't need rehearsed moans or strategic positions or carefully timed movements. It just needs honesty. And honesty, while it may not always look flawless, feels unforgettable. That's what lingers. Not the angle, not the lighting, but the feeling of being seen, of being held, not just physically, but emotionally, of being fully witnessed in your vulnerability without being judged or reduced to a role. When intimacy is reduced to performance, it becomes a mask. And behind that mask is someone terrified of being rejected. Someone unsure if their unfiltered self is enough. So instead, they curate, they mold themselves into what they think their partner wants. And in doing so, they disconnect from their own truth. They touch, but they don't feel. They speak, but they don't say what matters. They move, but they never arrive. That's the most heartbreaking part, when someone shows up physically but leaves their emotional self at the door. When you're touched by hands that are empty of presence, when you're kissed by lips that are echoing a script, it can feel like betrayal, not because of what is done, but because of what's missing, the connection, the sincerity, the soul. And even if you can't articulate it in the moment, your body knows. It stiffens, it detaches, it whispers, something here is off. Performance kills real intimacy because it leaves no room for truth. It's hard to speak your needs when the other person is busy proving themselves. It's hard to slow down when everything feels like a race to climax. It's hard to just be when someone else is constantly doing. Real intimacy requires space, emotional space, psychological space, energetic space, space for awkwardness, for laughter, for messiness, for silence, for the kind of human imperfection that makes everything feel alive. The irony is, the more someone tries to perform, the less connected their partner often feels, because performance creates a wall. It says, I'm here to impress you, not I'm here with you. And that wall, no matter how seductive it looks, blocks emotional intimacy. It prevents safety. It turns something that could have been healing into something hollow. It makes you question if the moment meant anything at all. Have you ever laid next to someone after an intense encounter and felt more alone than ever? That's the void performance leaves behind, a moment that looks passionate but leaves no emotional trace, a scene that plays well to the eye but collapses under the weight of silence. And what makes it worse is that society keeps telling us this is normal, that sex is about technique, about aesthetics, about the illusion of perfection. But real intimacy doesn't care about perfection. It craves presence. It craves truth. The people who leave a mark on your soul aren't the ones with the best lines or the best skills. They're the ones who show up without a mask, who touch you like you matter, who listen, who slow down, who lean in, not to conquer but to connect. Those moments may not always look cinematic, but they feel real, and in the world of intimacy, real is everything. When someone finally stops performing and starts being, everything changes. The pressure fades, the connection deepens. You stop feeling like an audience member and start feeling like a participant in something meaningful, something sacred. And that space where no one's performing, where both are present, is where the deepest intimacy lives. Have you ever stopped to ask yourself what you're really giving away when you share your body with someone? Not just skin, not just time, but energy, access, vulnerability, intimacy is never just about physical touch. It's a gateway to the emotional core. Every time you allow someone that close, you're opening a sacred space, whether you realize it or not. And if that space isn't respected, it leaves a wound that doesn't always bleed, but always echoes. Because who you share yourself with doesn't just affect your night, it shapes your inner world. We live in a culture that normalizes casual closeness and emotional detachment, but the truth is, there's nothing casual about who you allow into your body. Intimacy is an exchange of energy, of of emotional history. It's not just what happens in the moment, it's what lingers after. And if someone carries unresolved pain, manipulative intent, emotional instability, or shallow motives, that energy enters with them. And when they leave, what stays behind is more than memory, it's residue. That residue can look like confusion, restlessness, anxiety that wasn't there before, self-doubt you can't explain, a heaviness in your spirit, and you might blame yourself for feeling too much or wonder why a simple experience has left such a deep impact. But what you're feeling isn't weakness, it's the energetic truth. You allowed someone into the most vulnerable space you possess, and instead of nourishment, they left disarray. It wasn't the act, it was the absence of alignment, intention, and care. Sex isn't just physical, it's psychological, it's emotional, it's spiritual. It touches parts of you that words don't reach. It's where your inner world meets another. And when that other isn't worthy of that access, you don't just feel regret, you feel disruption. Something inside you goes quiet. Something else starts to guard itself. And over time, the more often you share that space without discernment, the more desensitized you become, not just physically, but emotionally. Intimacy begins to feel mechanical. Safety becomes a performance, and connection starts to feel unreachable. Have you ever felt the need to recover after being with someone? Not just physically, but emotionally, energetically. That's not drama. That's your system recalibrating from exposure, from being open to someone who didn't offer the depth, care, or integrity that space required. The soul always knows when something sacred has been handled carelessly, and it will grieve, even if the body tries to pretend otherwise. That's why discernment is power. Who you give access to isn't just a personal preference, it's an act of self-respect. It's an act of protection. It's a decision that says, my energy matters, because sex is not a transaction, it's a transfer. What someone carries within them becomes a part of you. Their fears, their chaos, their trauma, their intentions. It all weaves itself into that moment, silently but powerfully. And you feel it, even if you can't explain it. So many people walk around feeling disconnected from themselves, not realizing that it's not because they've lost who they are, it's because they've given themselves away to people who didn't deserve that kind of access. They've opened sacred parts of themselves to people who only knew how to consume, not connect. And now those pieces feel scattered, distant, dull. But healing starts the moment you stop giving your soul away in fragments to those who've never earned your trust. This isn't about shame, it's about truth, about understanding the weight of what you carry. Your body is not a playground for someone's boredom. It's not a distraction. It's not a test. It is a vessel of energy, emotion, memory, and intuition. And when you choose to share it, it should be with someone who understands the magnitude of that invitation, someone who honors it, someone who brings peace, not confusion, grounding, not chaos, clarity, not mixed signals. Because real intimacy doesn't leave you questioning your worth. It doesn't demand you shrink to be desired. It doesn't play games with your soul. Real intimacy meets you where you are and asks nothing but truth. And that kind of intimacy only comes from those who see your value before they ever touch your body, from those who aren't afraid of depth, of emotional presence, of showing up fully. Have you ever walked away from someone and felt like you left a part of yourself behind? That's the cost of intimacy without alignment, and that cost compounds every time you ignore your own boundaries. Every time you quiet your gut, every time you say yes when your soul is screaming no. Every time you allow someone in not because they've earned it, but because you didn't want to feel alone. But here's the irony, there is no deeper loneliness than being naked with someone who doesn't see you. There is no colder silence than laying next to someone who only wanted your body, not your being. Your intimacy is not just about what you give, it's about what you absorb. The aftermath is just as sacred as the act. And if what follows is confusion, self-doubt, detachment, emotional exhaustion, your body is speaking to you loudly. Because your body isn't here to perform, it's here to protect, to feel safe, to heal. And when it doesn't feel safe, it will let you know. So the next time someone asks for access to your most sacred space, ask yourself, what energy are they bringing with them? What intentions do they hold? Do they leave people better or broken? Do they offer presence or performance? Do they bring depth or distraction? Because this isn't just about pleasure. This is about your peace. This is about your soul, and who you let into that space will either honor it or hijack it. And that choice is always, always yours.